I linked the full story of my failed marriage above if you want more background. I had been officially divorced for 5 to 6 weeks, separated for 5 to 6 months. When my ex-wife contacted me, I thought I was ready for that. I wasn't. When she did, I asked for space. I really didn't know what we were getting at. Honestly, if I had any success in my dating life over that time, I probably wouldn't have entertained the conversation. By time we finally talked, it had been over a week. It began with just some really surface-level stuff. She had stated that she missed me and was finally beginning to see my perspective on our problems. Initially, I didn't really know how to take that. I decided I wasn't going to be the first to talk. I had talked a lot at the end of our marriage and was met with stonewalling, gaslighting, minimizing. I was more interested if she really had come to a revelation. It wasn't until the third day that we finally had a real deep conversation. She came out and told me, I realized we didn't end up divorced because of a lack of BJ's or doggy style, it was a lack of effort on my part. She admitted that she focused on that so much during our last months, and felt offended. She told herself I was an asshole for implying I owned her body or was owed it. She kept this narrative to herself because she didn't want to face what I was really saying. Now that it was over, and the trauma of Kristen's wedding was fresh, it was like a fog had evaporated. She told me she started to realize how slow the progression happened. It started before we even met. She was closing in on graduation, and thought to herself it was time to stop playing around. She always had a thing for the shy, quiet type, and I walked into her life at the right time. She wanted me to know that she really did love me, this wasn't a thing of her settling. I appreciated that and took it as sincere. We went back to talking about the imbalance in our relationship, and she stated she inadvertently took advantage of my inexperience. If she had a bad day, I'd do little more. If she was feeling stressed about something, I'd pick up slack where I could. Then that would continue. It took time, but before she knew it I was doing 75 to 80% of the stuff around the house. I wasn't going out with my friends or even getting on the games, I was only doing things with her or her friends. The thing was, she admitted that at the time, she was blind to this all the way up to the point that it became the norm. I then asked about the physical side of the relationship. The reasoning didn't make me feel better, but at least it was there. Brooke told me a story of how when she was heading off to college her mother told her, I'm not naive, so I'm going to give you some advice, have your fun now, be safe, but get it out of your system. Then find you somebody, but when you do you start acting like a wife from day one. I said, are you fucking kidding me, that's the dumbest advice I've ever heard. She realizes that more now, she even thought that at the time she got it, but after meeting me, and the obvious lack of relationship experience I had, it kind of crept into her. She thought, I need to take it slow with him, not scare him off, minimize my experience. Then just like the other aspects of our life, it grew into complacency. I was feeling good about this conversation, I knew we had a lot more to discuss, but it was going in the right direction, maybe there was something that could be revived. Then she asked me about my dating life. After I answered she seemed like she regretted the question. Probably because she knew it was going to be asked back. I hadn't heard much about the wedding up to that point other than it was a disaster, her and Kristen were no longer friends, and she didn't want to talk about it. When it got to the part about Chris, it was hard to hear. I did ask how she behaved during this week and she said, uninhibited. It wasn't a deal breaker, but I once again needed time to process and evaluate my own feelings. I thought I had my mind ready, but the conversation was short as she wasted no time letting me know about the pregnancy. That was a deal breaker. We both knew it was done at that point. I told her goodbye for the last time. 2 weeks went by and I was still evaluating my life. I was about to turn 30 and didn't want my next 30 years to resemble my first 30. I had been doing the hard emotional work, learning about communication and relationships for over a year at this point. I had given up every relationship I had, at every step, my whole life. I gave up my friends, all of them, after the pool incident. I made a few new ones, then didn't keep in touch after I left for college. I did the same thing again when college ended. I finally said yes to going out with my coworkers, only to cut them when Brooke came into my life. Now she was gone too, and the only meaningful relationship I still had was with my parents. This is what I needed. I needed to connect with people. I didn't feel the fear and insecurity I had always had. It was time to take real steps. To build real connections, whether that be romantically or just friends. I had to admit to myself that ever since my therapist gave me that book on E&M, it had been sitting in my mind, just occupying a spot in the back. I made the decision this was my new path. I did some research and put my app focus into Tinder, OkCupid and Field. It took months to get a meaningful match. I kept improving myself in that time. It was worth the wait as it all set me on a life path that just a few years earlier would have been impossible. I had been on the apps for a few months. I was taking a proactive approach. Looking at different bios and upgrading mine as I went. I even posted it on Reddit for judgment. I knew I had to have other relationships beyond just romantic/sexual. It had been 3 years since the last time Vince invited me out with the guys. I would have given up on me too. I said yes once, met Brooke, then went back to acting like no one else was worth my time. When I made the effort to invite myself out this time I was fully prepared to get rejected. Not Vince though, he was still just as extroverted and inviting as he was years earlier, and for some reason still likes going to Hooters. I went a few times, but finally decided that a weekly bout with XAS, exploding ass syndrome, wasn't worth it and began skipping Thursday wings and instead invited Vince to be my gym bro. He was always complaining about being out of shape and I had always been the tall skinny guy. I was ready to try and build a little muscle. I finally got an ideal match, for lack of a better term. Evelyn was 28, recently out of an 11-year monogamous relationship. She was beautiful and extroverted. I for some reason am drawn to these people despite my natural proclivity to the opposite. We had a lot of discussions before finally having that first date. Our biggest focus was making sure we had compatibility in the type of relationships we were looking for, as obviously we both had E&M in our profiles. She said a huge green flag for me was just my ability to have a conversation lol. She had weeded through so much trash just trying to find a few worthwhile matches. I over the years had pretty much the opposite experience, few matches but the quality of those that occurred was usually high. She wanted to be in this type of lifestyle because she had only ever dated one person. She said her and her previous boyfriend simply grew apart. As the years wore on they grew further apart. She wanted to expand her social circle, make new friends and go on adventures. He was shrinking his social circle and preferred to have a few close friends for small typical gatherings. She said she was working up the courage to bring up the idea of an open relationship, when he ended it, citing many of the things that she felt. They were just becoming too different. I told her all about my history, no need to recap that for everyone. I broke it down into a basic statement. I mostly avoided people for 30 years, I was going to make up for lost time. With the history out of the way we talked about what we wanted out of relationships. She said she wanted to have many casual encounters, and to just see which grew into more naturally. I told her I was looking to create bonds, whether romantic or platonic. After a week or so of messaging we decided to meet. We had a great first date, which saw my gangly ass trying to keep up with her on a bicycle. Followed by, I guess you would say, brunch. It was 10:30 in the morning on Saturday and it wasn't breakfast food. Date ended with our first kiss and I was excited to meet again. As we parted I asked if she wanted to meet up again that night. She told me she was seeing someone else later, but we should do something tomorrow. I had pickleball planned with Vince and 2 other guys from work, so I said maybe later in the week. She accepted that, and I was proud myself. Old me would have definitely cancelled on the guys. I'll admit that I did feel a level of jealousy that she was going out with another guy. I sat with that thought and processed it. Obviously it's a natural reaction, it's okay to feel this way, I just found myself wondering why. We both had talked at length about how we wanted to live, and for fuck's sake we'd only been on one date. I went to a movie that night, alone, to help keep me occupied. The next day I owned everyone on the P-ball courts. Evelyn messaged me that night and we made plans for Thursday. That would be the first time we had sex and the chemistry between us was incredibly strong. I hadn't been this smitten with someone since Brooke first cleaned up my huge beer mess. From there we hit the ground running. We were messaging daily and having 1 to 2 dates a week with each other. She had one other guy she was also seeing somewhat regularly. Over the next 4 months our relationship just kept progressing to more and more overnights with each other. Her other partner had developed into mostly just a FWB situation. She said they just didn't have much in common other than good sexual chemistry. She had a couple of short hookups that ran their course pretty quick. I wasn't having any more luck with romantic partners but did make a platonic connection with a young woman coworker. She was interested in pickleball, and with our budding friendship I finally had a partner for local co-ed tournaments. As we neared the 5-month mark, I got an unexpected yet welcome proposition from Evelyn. She asked me to be her official boyfriend. She made it clear she was not interested in changing our dynamic, she still wanted an open relationship, which was good because so did I. I was invited to her family's for the Easter holiday and she wanted to be able to say, "This is my boyfriend." I was down because she said no one was actually religious, it was just a fun holiday in their family, barbecue, egg hunts and coloring, and by far the best candy holiday. Yeah, I said it, Halloween is number 2. Our relationship was rolling along nicely. We were spending 3 to 4 nights together a week at this point. I love you was part of the vocabulary, and I was feeling a strong level of compulsion for her in regards to her other relationships. It helped I had a life separate from her, especially since I had no other partners at this time. That's when I met partner number 2, and learned this life wasn't all rainbows, butterflies, and hot sex. I had matched with Dana, a 41-year-old woman in a newly open marriage. She was very eager to get out there and meet new people, although I'm gonna be honest, it really came off as she was really eager to get out there and hook up. Today me would have seen all the red flags, but then me was still new to all of this. Evelyn did have an uneasy feeling about her but at the same time wanted to be supportive of me because I had a match, which wasn't common. Today Evelyn would not have held back her opinion. I knew Dana was playing the field, and our relationship was mostly physical, with texting some days. I did make a hierarchical decision that Evelyn was my primary and let Dana know that. She was fine with that. Over the course of 6 months or so she was trying to meet up with me more often, calling me her go-to. It was also around this time we started to have deeper conversations, and she started sharing more about her marriage. She let me know she hasn't ever been really satisfied with their sex life during the entire 15 years of marriage and 17 years together. This really felt like an overshare at the time. Dana basically came to him and suggested they open up. He was apparently extremely apprehensive. She persisted, and eventually he gave in. She hit the market hard from the word go. He didn't make an attempt until months in, but had made good effort the past couple months. She started to vent to me that he was making statements about wanting to close, which she was very against, and said if he just put himself out there more he'd be more successful. My morbid curiosity got to me and I asked if he had any successes at all. She said no, and then asked me what I thought of his bio. This was not what I had planned on us doing this night, but I entertained it anyway. I said, "I notice it says, physical relationship only, what's up with that?" She replied, "It's just our boundaries, use protection, keep each other aware of our dates, no feelings just sex, repeat partners are fine unless you get feelings then you need to end it." I said, "Maybe that's the problem." She said, "What is?" I said, "Well, what can he really offer? I'm not surprised he doesn't have any success, your rules have kind of created a systemic one-sided open relationship." She got really defensive, "I don't know what you mean, he has just as much opportunity as me, he just needs to put himself out there more." I, in my stupidity, replied, "Not really, there's a lot of guys out there offering and looking for casual sex, the pool of women doing the same is a lot smaller. I mean, what's the oldest guys you've seen since opening? I don't want you to take this the wrong way but we are an obvious example, you're 11 years older than me. Your husband is 44 right?" And all he can offer is casual sex. How is he supposed to beat out the 25-year-olds who can offer the same thing? She got noticeably pissed off at my logic and decided to cut our time short, saying she wasn't feeling good. I wasn't sure if I'd hear from her again, and when I did, I should have ended things, but again, I was still a noob. 3 days later Dana started messaging me again, wanting to meet. She was excited because her husband had a date that same night. I agreed and things went normalish for about 2 more months. I did notice that she seemed more agitated as those 2 months progressed. Then we had the fallout. It was Evelyn and I's designated Thursday date night. We heard a knock at my apartment door, which was weird. I looked, saw Dana, and when I opened the door she came barreling in a total mess. We managed to calm her down and ask what was wrong. She told us her husband was going to leave her. I responded with, "I'm really sorry to hear that, but don't you have sister or something that would be better to talk to?" She completely ignored my statement and just started spilling the details. Well, that date he had gotten 2 months earlier, it worked out for him. Their relationship had been growing week by week, when Dana asked him if he had feelings. He admitted he did. She told him per their agreement he needed to end the relationship. They fought and he agreed to end things. But that didn't happen. He continued to see her, and when confronted told her that he'd rather end their marriage than his relationship with this woman. Now she was here in my apartment interrupting date night. We talked her down off the edge and told her she needed to either go home or go somewhere else. She got angry at me, and Evelyn stepped in and told her she needed to get out. I backed Evelyn up and Dana left in a huff. I apologized to Evelyn profusely, but she just said, "Don't worry, one of us was bound to have something like this happen eventually." Dana tried calling me later on and I messaged her that her behavior earlier was unacceptable. Then let her know that I would not be meeting with her ever again. At that point I blocked her. I didn't hear from her again. However, after a year my curiosity got the better of me and I stalked her socials with a burner account. I learned she did end up divorced, and was now engaged to someone else. This was definitely a learning experience for me. Evelyn and I ended up moving in together shortly after that. I was happy to have her as my nesting partner, and once again my only partner. I was at the point where I was ready to put dating on the back burner after the Dana situation. I had resolved myself that Evelyn and my ever-growing platonic friends group were gonna be my priority for the foreseeable future. I told myself that on a Tuesday while Evelyn was out on a date. The next morning, I woke up next to her. I must have been tired because I don't remember her coming in. I asked her how her night was. She said to me, "I want to go to Desires next month, can you make that happen?" "Yeah babe, I can make that happen." We went to Pearl. It was a really good time. Leading up Evelyn said she had been fantasizing about seeing me with others. I hadn't really had that same fantasy. Obviously I knew she was with others, but I was just indifferent about the actual act. My compersion came in seeing her happy and being able to be herself. We went into it planning on swinging for the first time. I was excited but nervous about performance anxiety. All my fears were short-lived, and we relaxed into the atmosphere pretty quick on the first day. We did connect with a couple. We were kinda worried our pool would be small. Evelyn is a strictly straight woman, and has no interest in playing with other women, so we did have some worry we would be the odd ducks, knowing that is pretty common in the lifestyle. Our worries were quickly proven to be unfounded. We spent a good portion of the week hanging with Jason and Erica. We full swapped twice with them, which Evelyn loved and I thoroughly enjoyed. Evelyn even commented how I had this "kid on Christmas" look on my face when we got to the room later. I said, "I think you forget that Erica, that was only my 4th ever." She laughed and in a cutesy teasing way said, "Oh sweetie, I forget you don't have as much sex as I do, we should have gotten a picture for the scrapbook." I told her, "Very funny." It was quite the revitalizing trip. Most of time we spent getting physical with just each other. Evelyn had one solo hookup on day 4 when I drank way too much and told her to enjoy the night alone because I was going to sleep it off. We got back from the trip, and had a discussion about including swinging in our lives whenever it fit. I agreed completely, it was much easier meeting a play partner when my GF was doing the finding lol. Over the next 2.5 years our lives rolled on. We bought a house together and tossed around the marriage talk. Her prior partners all kind of moved on over time, and she was dating less. I was still hanging with friends when possible. I swore I wasn't going to let friendships lapse, and I was doing my best to stick to that, even if the frequency was less. I had made a LDR, long-distance relationship, that started online. We would meet 2 to 4 times a year depending on her work travel schedule. I went on a conference trip, and hooked up with woman I met in the wild. When I got back, Evelyn made me a big cupcake that said, first ONS, and then took a picture, for the scrapbook. She is such a smartass. We swung here and there, and all in all had really good experiences with it. Except for one couple. I was making our online connection this time. I met this couple that seemed a good fit. Evelyn joined the conversation later and agreed they were our vibe. We talked boundaries, let them know Evelyn wasn't bi, we were full swap, and all that. They asked if we could do separate room, we didn't normally, but had before, so we said yes. They seemed excited and agreed to all the boundaries. We met and had dinner, and got along great. They matched their pictures. We invited them back to our place for some fun. The plan was Evelyn would take hubby into the spare room, while wifey and I took the couch. The wifey seemed to be stalling, asking for another drink, asking random questions about the house for some reason, then she said she needed to use the bathroom even though she just went before we split up. She went down the hall and I waited. Eventually I heard a call from down the hall. I ran down to the spare room. Wifey was in there. Evelyn was fine but seemed confused. She said, "Are you really tapped out already?" I was like, "No, we haven't even started yet." I guess wifey had come down and said I was tapped and wanted to join. Evelyn said no, she not interested in women, and then called for me as it sounded far-fetched. I annoyedly said, "Really, you two are wife poachers? And desperate wife poachers at that." Hubby got pissed and said they weren't. I said, "Yeah you are, and dumb ones." We were very clear up front about what we were up for. Wifey chimed in, "I just wasn't sure if you were interested, so I thought maybe we could just pay attention to her, she didn't have to touch me." I was really annoyed now, wasn't sure I was interested. You want me to tie a little flag to my heart on next time? What am I saying? There won't be a next time. Okay, let me put this nicely. Evelyn interjected, "You two fuckers need to get out of our house right now." Me, yeah, what she said. They huffed, gruffed, got dressed and left. After this we took some time off from extracurriculars. Evelyn was between partners and logged out of her apps for the time. I was only seeing my LDR, and that was one night every 2 to 6 months. It was about a year of being 99% just us that I proposed. She said yes immediately and we agreed a quick courthouse wedding, and putting all our money on the honeymoon was way more fun. We began our honeymoon in New Orleans. We mostly did touristy trips and messed up the hotel bed. Evelyn said since we were here we had to check out Colette. I was down. We hadn't played in forever. We're enjoying ourselves when Evelyn bumps me and yells in my ear, "Isn't that your ex-wife?" I look at where she's pointing and sure enough there is Brooke. Chris walks up to her a moment later and hands her a drink. Our eyes meet, and I think we both had the most WTF moment of our lives. I had not seen this woman in 5 years. I'm at Swinger Club in New Orleans, 1,000 miles from home, and there is my ex-wife, wearing a dress that would barely cover my left leg. I hadn't seen her in anything that revealing since she quit Hooters. I think I did a triple take. She was looking back at me with an equally shocked face. Then all 4 of us began slowly walking towards one another. It began with an awkward hug, and a handshake for Chris. I introduced Evelyn. It felt good to be able to say, "This is my wife." We all made some small talk about the place. They shared this was their first time at a place like this, and first attempt at taking their bedroom life, out of their own bedroom. We said it was our first time in a club as well, but we had been enjoying the lifestyle for a few years. There were some awkward pauses and it seemed like Brooke wanted to say something to me. Evelyn finally piped up and said, "Chris, I see your drink is almost empty, let me get you another one so these two can have their 5-year-old conversation." He just said, "Oh my God, thank you." If the awkward tension got any worse I was going to start break dancing. Like that they turned and headed off. Brooke turned to me, "You look really good." I said, "You too." She then began, "I am still really sorry, when I got back from that wedding I just wanted you back, I came to realize how bad I treated you during our marriage." I looked down at her, "It's all water under the bridge now, you got me out of my shell when I was ready to be alone forever, so I thank you for that, and in a weird way without me going to therapy for the problems we had, I wouldn't have the life I have now." We endured one more awkward hug, and our spouses came back over. We all parted ways for a while. Evelyn looked at me, "So what's the plan?" I said, "Well, it's a night with single guys, you want to try and make your MFM fantasy a reality." She got really excited, kissed me and said, "You're the best." She went out and found another married guy whose wife was off doing her own thing. As we partook I noticed Brooke and Chris had come in and were watching. When the other guy was tapped out, Evelyn and I went out to get some drinks. She went to the bathroom, and Brooke came over again to talk. She told me her and Chris talked. He thinks Evelyn is amazing, and would be up for swap if we were. I said, "And you?" She said, "I thought we could get, closure." I looked at her, she was still stunning, and said, "I appreciate the offer but not a chance in hell." Then I laughed, she laughed too, and said, "Ouch, rejected, I guess I know how it feels now." We parted ways with a quick hug. Evelyn and I went back to the hotel. We all became social media friends afterwards, but no real interactions outside of happy B-Day messages. Brooke and Chris are still together and have 2 kids now. Evelyn and I are still together a decade later. We take our open relationship pretty casually, neither pursuing, just indulging when the opportunity presents. We still hit the occasional club or resort. I however did have to endure my greatest and most devastating breakup during this time. After years of dominance on the co-ed pickleball courts my partner dumped me for her new boyfriend, my buddy Vince. We still both lament the loss though. Me because Evelyn absolutely refuses to play, and her because Vince is just terrible.